Welcome to this briefing on the 2024 Architecture Awards Program, and more specifically, their requirements for entry in the SA Chapter Awards Program. I'm Nicolette Delernier, and I'm the SA Executive Director for the Australian Institute of Architects. The briefing is intended to provide an update to allow all entrants to better understand those aspects of the program that have been introduced this year, as well as providing background information for people who perhaps have not entered recently or are new entrants to the program. I acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from the country of the Kaurna people, and I pay my respects to their elders past and present. To begin, I'd like to make you aware of the key dates for the 2024 SA Awards Program. They're shown on the screen, but the same information is also available on the Institute's website on the awards page and in the 2024 Architecture Awards Entry Handbook, which is also on the website. If you are an entrant or would like to be a juror, please make note of the relevant dates in your calendar. These are now fixed in place, and you will need to be sure that you're available for those as an entrant or juror. I also remind you that Jury Presentation Day is open to everyone. It's a great way to understand some of the motivations behind the projects that have been entered, and we encourage everybody to attend and would love to see you on the 16th of March. To be eligible to enter a project in the SA Chapter Awards, you need to be a current member of the Institute and a registered architect in South Australia. The project must have been completed no later than December the 31st, 2023, be physically located in South Australia, and have achieved a pass in at least 2 of the 6 categories in the sustainability checklist. This last requirement is a new one for 2024. The checklist is located on the digital entry and is at the beginning of the entry form. It's one of the first pieces of information that you will be asked to complete. It's possible to go back and review your responses, and it should be quite achievable for you to achieve those 2 pass sections in that checklist. Each of the 6 sections has a separate focus on different aspects of sustainability, and we feel confident that people who are practicing architecture will be able to meet those requirements with relative ease. Additional details about the awards program are available in the awards entry handbook, and that is available on the Institute's website. Other things to consider when you're entering your project are as follows. Key one to ask yourself is my project ready? And it's not just about it being practically complete as of December the 31st. It's also about whether it has reached a point where all of the key aspects of the project that you want the jury to see when they visit in April, and which you want the photographer to capture in the images that you're going to be uploading later in February, are at a suitable stage of completion. That might be a consideration of whether, for example, some of the tenancies in the building have been fully fitted out and occupied and are operating as intended. That can dramatically change the way in which people perceive the space that you've entered. Another one that catches a lot of people out is whether the landscaping for the project has reached a suitable level of maturity. Very new landscaping can be detrimental to giving a really good impression of the project and the way it's intended to be perceived. So give that some good consideration. I understand that people get nervous about what will happen to the building once it's been fully occupied and whether it's going to get knocked about or be, perhaps not kept in a good condition. But sometimes being under ready is more impactful than being well used. Another really important consideration is which category should you enter. There are 10 core categories, and some projects will very obviously fit into one or a few of those categories. Others are harder to place, either because they're multi-use buildings or because they could be equally included in one or another category where multiple categories aren't appropriate. For example, you might have a school arts centre, which is also made available to community groups and local theatre organisations. Is that then a public building, a commercial building, or an education building? The key consideration when you're making that choice is what are the core aspects that really demonstrate why this project is worthy of an award from your perspective, and which category will allow you to highlight those in the most meaningful way. If you are concerned about that selection and you want to talk it through, please do. It may also be the case that the jury, once entries have closed, looks at the category it's been entered into and feels that it would be appropriate for it to be considered in a different category, in which case that will be discussed with the entrant. The sustainability checklist we've already touched on. As I've said, you need to get a pass in 2 of 6 sections for your entry to be considered in any of the core categories. However, that's not the case if the category that it's been entered into is either the small project or the heritage category. The checklist requirement does not apply to those 2 core categories. Attribution and copyright also need to be touched on. Copyright is very important. The Institute require entrants to make sure that they have the permission of their client before they can enter their project, and there's an online consent form that is available in the digital entry. So that needs to be completed to ensure that, regardless of whether the copyright rests with the architectural practice or the client, that you have the client's permission to enter their building. The second copyright requirement is around the photography of the project. The photographer needs to give their permission for the use of the images in the context of the awards, and in South Australia in the context of making those awards images potentially available to the practice board. And again, there's a digital consent form on the online entry. Attribution is the other aspect that needs to be considered and relates to moral rights of authors of work. The photographs that are used will be attributed as per the information provided in the online entry form. And the other thing to really carefully consider is which practices get attributed when you place your entry in. So it's important to consider whether you have had collaborators on the project, whether they be joint venturers or specialist consultancy practices or allied professionals who have contributed significantly to the project. For example, if you have an urban design project that has been a close collaboration between yourself as the architect and an urban design practice and a landscape architect's practice, please make sure that those other 2 practices are suitably recognised in your entry. The other aspect of attribution to consider is whether you've done work to an existing building, either in the form of an alteration and addition or as an interior fit out to a building that your practice didn't do the base building works to. So in those instances, it is important that you have, where possible, identified the original author of the work and that those people are also attributed in your awards submission. Another new entry criteria this year is that we're asking for an admin contact as well as a project contact for each entry. The admin contact is there to provide administrative type information and support for the entry. So that's pretty straightforward. Things like when we come to organise the site visits, they might be the most appropriate person to organise that, that contact with the client. The other thing that they might be asked to do is provide a copy of a file if the original turns out to be corrupted, something fairly straightforward. The project contact is there for answering questions about the content of the entry. If the jury has a query regarding some of the entry material, has requested additional material, or there's some other content related query, then we would go to the project contact. It may be that the admin contact and the project contact are the same person, but there is the option to nominate two different people for those roles. The image checkbox I referred to glancingly before. In South Australia, we've now introduced for the first time in 2024 a checkbox that enables the images that are uploaded for an awards entry to be used as we would have done in the past in relation to the awards program, but also for those images to be made available to the Architecture Practice Board of South Australia for use on their website. By ticking that checkbox, you're agreeing to make those images available. They may not be used, but where they are, that provides a nice extension to the reach and impact that the awards program has for entering practices. You will need to make sure that your photographer is also aware of that additional use and that they're happy with that application of their images as well. And now moving on to the information provided. Each entry to the awards comprises three parts. The first is the digital entry, and that's used for informing the jury of the key aspects of the project, and they're carefully considered by the juries prior to the jury presentation day. But the information in that digital entry is also used for publication and promotion purposes. The written information that's provided is structured to address the key assessment criteria that are used in relation to the awards. And we ask that that information is provided in plain English. The information is going to be read by your peers, but it will also be used in promotion and publication contexts, as I've mentioned, and so we need it to be accessible and understood by the general public. So please steer clear of jargon and complicated expression, make it straight to the point and clearly understood. The images need to be labelled, and there's prompts on the digital entry regarding the labelling protocol. Please identify and carefully select your hero image. We will use that image in the context of promotion for the awards and publication of your project where that's relevant. And that will be the first image that we select wherever possible. There may be some cases where the platform or the publication that has requested content has a format requirement that does not suit the hero image that has been nominated, in which case we will select an alternate image from the entry to provide in that circumstance. Please no videos, they need to all be still images. There's a requirement for 2 additional images for heritage entries to show the building prior to the work commencing. And in the interior category, it is strongly suggested that the images uploaded include 1 exterior image to provide some context for the entry. The digital entry also requests drawings, and we ask that they be uploaded in PDF format and preferably all in one file rather than multiple separate files. Plans, sections, elevations, whatever allows us and the juries to have a good understanding of the key aspects of the building that you have entered. Finally, there are supporting documents and there are prompts about where those need to be uploaded and the type of documents that need to be provided. For heritage applicants, again, where the building is listed, you're asked to upload a statement of significance. If you're entering a building that has not been listed, then we ask that you prepare a short statement that conveys what you understand the significance of that building to be, so that the jury has a reference point to understand how you have approached that context. It's also a useful statement to have on record when we're talking about why certain decisions have been made, perhaps in a promotional media context. Finally, with the consent forms, again, there are prompts through the entry as to where they are required. Please leave time to get them signed so that you can have them uploaded. If it is not possible to provide all of the information by the closing date in February, there is the opportunity to have the digital entry reopened. There will be a fee charged in relation to that to cover the administrative costs. And so we encourage you not to do that if you can help it, but if for some reason, for example, the photographer can't provide all the finished images when the entries close, or you haven't been able to get a consent form signed, it is possible to have small amounts of information uploaded after the closing date for entries, for which there will be a fee. The second component of the entry is the PDF file that we ask you to provide. We ask for it in PDF format and not as a PowerPoint, so that we know that it's going to be a stable format and it won't corrupt when we show it on jury presentation day. That file is only used for the jury presentations. We ask that it be no more than 30 images, and that is very deliberate because we don't want people racing through or only getting through half their images before their presentation needs to conclude. And 30 is plenty of images. If you have a very large project, that can seem pretty difficult to achieve. We really want you to distill down and be very critical in the way you select the images and what you want to say in your presentation. The presentation time is 7 minutes, which is also quite a compact time to present, especially for larger projects. And it's really important that you think very carefully about what the key aspects are that you want to communicate to the jury. You may want to focus on things that you haven't talked about a lot in your digital entry, so that you can then expand on that information and build on that story that you've told in the written submission. You may want to stress particular points that you believe are critical to the success of the project and why it deserves an award. So please practice your presentation in advance. Be very clear about why your project is worthy of an award. What information can you do that adds to or highlights or builds on that digital entry information that you've already provided? And make sure that the information is relevant to the category, especially where you have entered the project in more than one category. I appreciate that there's a lot of work that goes into awards entry preparation. However, if you have invested in and committed to entering a project in multiple categories, please make sure that your digital entry and your jury presentation are really speaking to the category that that entry is relating to, because otherwise it won't be as effective as you would like it to be. And people do notice when the same content is provided across multiple categories. It doesn't read well, and it sells your entry short, so please try and avoid that. As I've said, the presentation time is 7 minutes. That will be followed by 3 minutes for question and answer time with the jury, and we will not be extending those time periods for any project. The jury day has multiple juries meeting at any one time. There are people who are both jurors in one category and entrants in another, and if we don't stick to the time that's been allocated, the whole thing tends to fall apart a bit like a doctor's waiting room. So yes, we really need people to take that 7-minute presentation time seriously and to work to that, please. The final component of the entry is the A1 presentation board. That is used for exhibition, awards exhibitions, and we hold one in South Australia at ODASA, which coincides with the launch of the program and the jury presentation day. And then a few months later, we hold an exhibition at Adelaide Airport in the Virgin Departure Lounge. So there are a couple of great opportunities there to communicate your projects out to a range of other audiences. The A1 boards need to be in a portrait format because that suits our heating system for the airport. If they're not in portrait format, we won't be able to show them there. We ask that one clear image is used per board. It's much more effective and has much better impact, especially in the space the size of the airport, rather than a lot of smaller images and text. And this year, for the first time, we're asking that people don't print their boards onto foam core backing. We would like them to be mounted on a recyclable cardboard backing, which will allow us to be much more, allow us to recycle them at the end of the program and create a much smaller amount of waste as a result of the awards entries. So the categories. There are 10 core categories that a project can be entered into. A project can be entered into more than one category, and where that's done, a separate fee will apply to each entry. There are some categories that you can't enter into together. The key ones are public architecture and educational architecture. You need to choose between those, you can't enter into both. And public and commercial is the other. You need to pick one or the other. The other thing to remember is that small project architecture excludes permanent residential projects, regardless of their scale. So all residential projects need to be entered into the appropriate residential category. The small project architecture category is intended for non-residential projects of a smaller scale or cost, there's no hard and fast rules about what the maximum cost or the maximum size should be, but they need to be smaller in scale. And they can also include temporary work. A project entered into a core category can also be entered to any or all of the indirect entry categories by ticking the relevant checkbox. There is no additional cost to enter these indirect categories, and we'll discuss each of those three in further detail later in the presentation. In addition, in South Australia, you can also enter the City of Adelaide Prize, and that is only assessed at the South Australian chapter level. It doesn't continue through to the national awards, and again that is free to enter, and I'll speak again about that in more detail later. Projects for consideration for the Enduring Architecture Prize aren't able to be entered through the digital portal. If you have a project that you would like to be considered for the Enduring Architecture Prize, so it needs to have been open and operating for at least 25 years, and it needs to be demonstrating the value of good design some 25 years following its original opening. So if you have a project that is worthy of consideration in your opinion for the Enduring Architecture Prize, please email that through to the South Australian chapter and provide as much supporting information as you can, which will assist the Honours Committee in assessing those nominations. The Honours Committee in South Australia is the jury for the Enduring Architecture Award. The other two additional awards that are available are also not able to be directly entered. The first is the SA Architecture Medal, which is selected from the entries that have been awarded a named award. And the other is the Sir James Irwin President's Medal, which is selected by the South Australian Chapter President. People will frequently ask questions about the judging and the jury process, and so I'd like to talk briefly about those aspects of the program. In South Australia, we have multiple juries. Categories with a small number of entries will be grouped together for consideration by one jury. Categories with a larger number of entries will be considered by a dedicated jury. The number of entries in South Australia is relatively contained, so we are able to run a multi-jury system effectively. We try and make sure that each jury considers no more than 12 projects, and that way the workload is kept within manageable bounds for everybody. We also need to consider conflicts of interest when we select our juries, and so final jury makeups and the clustering of categories into juries where there are smaller numbers of entries only occurs once the entries are closed. Where a category has more than 10 entries, we may consider shortlisting. We won't shortlist unless there are at least 10 entries in a category. And where shortlisting does occur, that will follow the jury presentations. So every entrant will have a chance to present to the jury. We also visit all of the projects in South Australia unless there is a shortlisting process that's taken place, in which case only the shortlisted projects will be visited. The site visit component of the awards program is a very important one for the Institute. It makes our awards program unique, and we believe it adds significant value to the information available to the juries when they are considering the entries. Architects are not present at the site visits in South Australia unless they are also the client for the project that's been entered. This allows the jury to engage openly with end users and clients and to gain independent understanding of the project. The architects for the project have had their opportunity to present their core information in the digital entry and the jury presentation, and we believe that that is sufficient. Each jury is made up of at least 4 people, and the jury chair and at least one other juror must have significant prior experience. They are there to provide a good process, a consistent process, and they need to have experience in both the architectural practice that they're, or the genre of project that their category is considering, but also in the way the awards program works. In addition to these two experienced people, we have, where possible, one much less experienced jury member, and possibly someone who hasn't been on a jury at all. And we try and have one of these newer jury members on each jury each year. And this enables them to gain experience while being supported by more experienced chair and other jury members. And it allows the South Australian chapter to develop a pool of jurors and to make sure that that pool remains fresh and provides us with as many opportunities and options as we can, so that we can effectively negotiate the requirements that we have when putting juries together. The key ones being avoiding any conflicts of interest, making sure we have appropriate experience, and the jury members have appropriate experience, and finally that we have gender balance across the juries. At times we have a guest juror involved, particularly where we recognise that we need specialist expertise in relation to a particular category. That person may be the fourth member of the jury, or may be a fifth member of the jury in some instances. So some juries will have 5 members. So each project is judged in relation to how well it responds to the 8 core criteria. Projects are not judged in relation to others in the category. We don't believe that this is reasonable or fair, given the variation in scale, budget, client requirements, context, and other factors that shape every project that's entered. So it's not a, is this project better or worse than that project? It is, how well does each project respond to the 8 core evaluation criteria, which are stated in the awards entry handbook, and which are listed on this slide. Again, if you have entered a project in more than one category, make sure that you respond to the criteria in the context of that category for each entry. This includes all of the information that you provide, so that you're really maximising your impact in relation to that category. So now I'd like to look at the 3 indirect categories briefly, starting with the Sustainability Sustainable Architecture Award. It's up to the entrant this year to nominate whether they want to be considered for the Sustainable Architecture category. Last year, the Institute decided who was eligible to be considered on the basis of their response to the sustainability checklist. This year, we've returned to a checkbox. If you mark that checkbox, your entry will be considered for that category. So, to be considered for the Sustainable Architecture Award, the entrant needs to tick the checkbox in the digital entry form when they are completing the core category entry. Complete the sustainability checklist, and as we've already noted, every entry will need to achieve a pass in at least 2 of the 6 sections of that checklist to be considered in any category. However, if you are wanting to be considered for the Sustainable Architecture Award, I would suggest that you would need to provide more detailed information and more supporting information in the checklist response that you provide. And the supporting information there are prompts that would help you determine what that supporting information should be. The sustainability jury will review all entries to the category and shortlist those meriting a jury presentation, and all entrants will be informed as to whether they have been shortlisted or not. The aim of the sustainability checklist is to increase the evidence base for entries in the category and to assist practices in improving their capabilities. The checklist is also a useful tool in discussions with clients regarding best practice in the sustainability space. So this is going to become an increasingly important aspect of awards entries as we move forward. It's important that members who want to participate in the awards program really build their familiarity with the checklist and consider it from the inception of their projects, so that you can make sure that you retain that capacity to continue to enter the awards program. This slide and the next two show examples of supporting information and resources, and we've put these in to assist entrants when they're preparing that information and to assist them in their practice as it relates to sustainable outcomes. So we hope that you find these useful, and we thank Ruth Nordstrom for putting this information together for us. We recommend that the sustainability checklist is completed by someone who has a good understanding of the subject matter and of sustainable practice. That way the questions will be interpreted correctly and the information that's uploaded will be meaningful. And we note that there were a couple of questions that caught people out last year. There's a couple of double loaded questions, so please read them carefully and review responses prior to submitting your entry. You can go back and work up your entry just as you can with other aspects of the digital entry, so please make sure that you're comfortable with it before the entry is submitted. COLORBOND Award for Steel Architecture. This is one that's been in the program for many years now, and while it was initially set up to look at any use of steel, the emphasis of the award now is on the use of COLORBOND and BlueScope product, and the requirement is that an entry must provide evidence that the products used on the project have been supplied by BlueScope if they want to be considered. So once you've ticked the COLORBOND Award for Steel Architecture checkbox, it will bring up the requirements for a short statement and then some supporting evidence. A BlueScope guarantee is not accepted as evidence. These guarantees, which are available from the BlueScope website, states what the guarantee would cover if BlueScope products are shown to be used on a particular project, but it doesn't prove that those products have actually been installed. It's a bit similar to saying that the specification includes BlueScope product. As we know, substitutions quite frequently occur. Suitable evidence is a delivery docket or an invoice stating that the products supplied in relation to the entered project have been sourced from BlueScope. And this can include roof and wall cladding, facings to insulated panels, pre-rusted steel, decorative steelwork, and visible steel framing and structure. Basically, if you check the COLORBOND Award for Steel Architecture checkbox, you need to make sure that you have evidence that all of the visible steel on your building has been sourced from BlueScope. And this evidence needs to be uploaded on the online entry. The third of the indirect entry categories is the Imagine Project Award, and this was introduced as a trial in SA in 2022 and was adopted nationally in 2023. It recognises the contribution of graduates and early career architects to the profession through their involvement in a specific project. It encourages practices to celebrate these achievements and highlights and showcases the development of staff. The project architect, or at least 50% of the project team, need to be members within the Imagine demographic for you to enter a project. And again, there's a checkbox to indicate whether you want to be considered for the Imagine Project Award. If the principal nominated for the project is not within the Imagine demographic, that's okay. The project should be of significant architectural merit, as well as demonstrating the ways in which Imagine team members have shown leadership, collaborated, and demonstrated expertise through the project delivery. This information is requested in the online entry once you tick the relevant checkbox. And finally, the City of Adelaide Prize and the People's Choice Award, which is associated with that. To be eligible to enter the City of Adelaide Prize, projects must be located in the City of Adelaide Council area, have been completed in the last 2 years, and add to the vibrancy and activity in the public realm of the City of Adelaide. Entry is free thanks to the generous support from the City of Adelaide Council. Entrants do not need to be institute members, and they can be architects, allied design professionals, artists, engineers, planners. Entries can be buildings, artworks, urban interventions, landscape projects or activations, and last year's winner was the skate park in the West Parklands. To enter, please complete the online entry in the digital portal and provide a PDF file for presentation to the jury. An A1 poster is not required, but can be provided if you would like your entry to be included in the awards exhibitions. All entries to the City of Adelaide Prize are also eligible to receive the People's Choice Prize. Remember to vote for your favourite entry. I hope that this provides you with the key information you need to complete your entry in the 2024 SA Architecture Awards and explains the changes that have come into effect this year. We also encourage anyone interested in being a juror to complete an EOI. If you have any further questions, please consult the Awards Entry Handbook or contact Jan Day or Nicolette Delernier at the SA chapter. Thanks for listening.